here today, and we're just kicking off the recording side of things, so people who can't make it can watch this a bit later on, or if you want to watch back. But welcome to all of you this afternoon. Thank you so much for signing up and joining us for this session on inclusive practice, organised by NICEC. So my name is Martin Edmonson. I am a fellow at NICEC, and in my day job, I'm the chief executive at AGCAS, which is the representative body for careers and employability in higher education. And it's a real privilege to be here today to be chairing this. This is my first time chairing a NICEC event, so apologies if it all goes pear-shaped. You can blame me for that. But all being well, we'll have a really good session this afternoon. We've got some brilliant speakers, some really great content. We'll be diving into both the theory and the practice of this really important topic. Also important just to give a quick name check to one of our other fellows, Ollie Jenkin, whose idea it was to run this session in the first place, and sadly can't be with us today due to other commitments, but thanks to Ollie for putting this one forward, because I think it's a really important topic that we get stuck into. Just to set the scene a little bit before we move on to our speakers and give you a bit of a sense of how the session's going to run today. In terms of how we're going to go through, we've got a number of speakers coming up who are going to cover lots of different aspects of this topic. And then we're going to have some space towards the end of the session where we'll go into breakout rooms. We'll have a chance for you to reflect a little bit on what you've heard, pull out perhaps some of the big takeaways that have resonated with you, and pick off a couple of questions that we're going to set for those discussion groups later on. And then we'll have some space for people to feed back on those at the end, and to sort of chip in with their thoughts and reflections after everything you've heard. But as I say, we've got some really, really interesting people coming to speak. I think this is a really important topic from my perspective. Personally, I'm relatively new to my role at AGCAS. I started that about 9 months ago, and before that, I ran a social enterprise called GradCore, which was the whole point of which was centred on about how do we level the playing field in the worlds of careers, employability, and graduate recruitment and early talent. And it seemed to me a really important area that we need to cover from all sorts of angles, whether that was from the angle of levelling the playing field for people entering jobs and recruitment processes, or whether that was in terms of the employability provision offered in my particular context within HE. And that applied to all sorts of people from different backgrounds, whether that was people with diverse characteristics or people with additional learning needs, and trying to create a situation where those things didn't get in the way or didn't prove barriers to people progressing and being successful. And I think that's something we can all hopefully sort of buy into and play a part in. One particular example I worked on quite a bit was, again, alongside a couple of graduate schemes in the public sector that we were working on, where we were seeing that particularly disabled graduates were not making their way through the process as much as some of the our client at the time was wanting to see, and was feeling like there was disadvantage almost like built into the process. So in that particular context, one of the things we did was apply a coaching program alongside the recruitment process, so that every stage, whether it was interview, psychometrics, assessment centres, that kind of thing, they could access some specific coaching to help support them. And then what we saw from that was a marked uptick in those students and graduates making it through to final stage and offers. So I think where we do get involved in this, and where we do really proactively engage, we can really make a difference. And so I think it's a super important topic, and I'm just really interested to hear from all of our speakers today on this, and looking forward to learning a lot from all of them as well. So in terms of the format and things, we've got the chat down there. So if any of you want to fire any questions or comments into the chat, please do. We're not actually, because we're trying to pack quite a lot into today, we're not going to do sort of a Q&A after each speaker. But if you do have specific questions for any of our speakers, do fire them into the chat. And when our speakers, most of our speakers, I think, are here for most of the session. So if they are, if they have a moment and they can potentially perhaps chip an answer into the chat, that would be fantastic to our speakers, if you don't mind doing that as we go through. But as I say, we've got a dedicated discussion session, a decent bit of time towards the end, where we'll go into breakout rooms, and we will be able to explore and reflect on and dive into some of the questions that emerge out of what we hear from our speakers today. So there will be a chance for you to get a bit more involved and to perhaps fire your own questions to each other. I hope that all makes sent. As for those just joining, we are recording, so hopefully that's all right with everybody. The recording will then be available later on if there's bits of this you want to watch back via the NICEC website. In terms of our speakers, I'm going to try as best we can to keep us pretty closely to time. So just a sort of message to our speakers that I'm going to go off camera, but if you see me reappear again, that means you've got probably a couple of minutes left. So if you could move to wrapping up when you see me appear, that would be fantastic, and then we can stay on track with time and content. If there's any questions or people aren't sure about anything, feel free to fire a question into the chat, and once I've stopped talking and introduced our first speaker, I'll keep an eye on that as well. Okay, so again, welcome to you all, and a particular welcome to our first speaker, Will Donald. And Will is going to be talking in his own right, but also has very kindly agreed to step in on behalf of Elizabeth, who was our second build speaker, but unfortunately is unwell today. So Will has very triumphantly agreed to do both sessions, which is very good of him, and both sets of slides, because there's some really helpful crossover as well between the two. So he's going to be covering that off. And so Will is from the University of Southampton and from the business school there. And he's going to be kicking us off with the first topic being how we look at fostering an inclusive and a sustainable career ecosystem. So thanks for joining us, Will, and also for making me feel massively underdressed. Superb bow tie there, my friend. Looking forward to hearing from you, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Martin, for the lovely introduction there. That's really kind. It's great to meet everyone as well. There's some people I've met before, some people I haven't. So thank you. Should probably hold off any thanks about me covering Elizabeth's part until I've actually done that, because whilst she's a very good friend of mine and I know her very well, I've only seen the slides fairly recently. So we'll do a best efforts basis. Just to check, everyone can see the screen share there. I'll just get rid of that. There we go. So yes, hi everyone. My name is Will Donald. I'm an Associate Professor of Sustainable Careers and Human Resource Management. I'm based at the University of Southampton. But before moving into academia back in 2014, I was a release manager, project manager, and then a graduate recruiter for an investment bank in London. I'm also autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, and housebound due to numerous other disabilities. So life is never dull. In 2022, I created the Weather as a Career Metaphor. In 2023, I founded Sustainable Career Ecosystem Theory. And then in 2024, I co-founded the Employability Capital Growth Model. And these are all interlinked. And we're going to have a look at the theory part of that this afternoon. I've published 3 books to date and have 2 more under contract. And I regularly write for Times Higher Education, Career Matters magazine, CEREC blog, Conversation on topics to do with inclusivity in higher education and graduate recruitment. And in 2025, this year, in January, I became co-editor of the journal Career Development International. And we've actually got a practitioner section there. So if anybody's interested in contributing to that and sharing your experience with a global readership, then please do let me know. I'd be happy to share more details. And then in 2022, I founded Donald Research and Consulting, and I've had the opportunity to partner with some brilliant organisations across Canada, UK, Singapore, and Australia. And in 2024, in November, I was fortunate to be listed in the Disability Power 100, which is by the Shaw Trust, of the 100 most influential disabled people in the UK. I was runner-up in the Education and Research category, which meant I was the second highest placed academic on the list. And all the people above us in the top 100 were Paralympians and TV presenters, so that was very exciting. And yes, you can connect with me at any point. I do have to run after this presentation because I have another engagement, but you can email me. I'm always on LinkedIn far too much, as many of you will know. Right, so let's begin with learning about sustainable career ecosystem theory. And it's underpinned by two separate theories, sustainable career theory and career ecosystem theory. So sustainable career theory, this was created by two fantastic academics and good friends of mine, Professors Ons de Vos and Beatrice van der Heijden, back in 2015 in their Handbook of Research on Sustainable Careers. And it adds the perspective of sustainability to contemporary career concepts to contribute a fresh perspective on careers that recognises its complexity. You can see the dyslexia there, that I struggle pronouncing certain words, so bear with me and feel free to smile in the background. The concept of a sustainable career, they define it as the sequence of an individual's different career experiences, reflected through a variety of patterns of continuity over time, crossing several social spaces, and characterised by individual agency, herewith providing meaning to the individual. So let's unpack that a bit to make that a bit more accessible as well. So put differently, it captures the interplay between three dimensions of the person, the individual, context, the environment in which they operate, and time, recognizing that there's progression over time rather than it being a static approach. It's a dynamic approach that's constantly evolving. And the indicators of a sustainable career that Beatrice van der Heijden propose are health, happiness, and productivity. Although, as On says, it's unlikely that an individual can have all of these all of the time. Now, a separate theory that developed in parallel to sustainable career theory is career ecosystem theory. And this was developed by my then PhD supervisor, Professor Yehuda Berek. He's also at the University of Southampton with me. And this expands the concept of an ecosystem from biology, ecology into the career studies literature. And interestingly, this was actually published in the same handbook as a separate chapter. And according to earlier work by Ian City and Levian back in 2004, ecosystem theory it's referring to a system that contains a large number of loosely connected, interconnected actors who depend on each other to ensure the overall effectiveness of the system. So Yehuda explains how a career ecosystem, it's a social system of employment, career-related development, and opportunity that emerges from the interconnectedness and the interdependencies among different actors, or if you prefer, stakeholders. These actors, they've traditionally been framed as individuals, organizations, and societies. And it's important to note again that the system is dynamic and it's in a constant state of change. I'll just have a quick look in the chat in case there's anything. No, excellent, good. Move that over here. Right, so sustainable career ecosystem theory, excuse me, it seeks to integrate these two theories, sustainable career theory and career ecosystem theory, by recognizing their overlapping and complementary dimensions. And such an approach offers applicability for preparing for and understanding career transitions, ranging from education into the labour market, to bridging work, and through to retirement. So it adopts a whole life perspective to life-wide learning and lifelong learning. Life-wide learning being the experiences we get from a variety of different areas at one point in time. As a student, that might be during your degree, it might be clubs and societies, people you live with, part-time work, internships, anything that you're doing at the same point in time. That's your life-wide. And then your lifelong learning is all about that commitment to development across the lifespan. And that's coined by Doug Cole, who's done some brilliant work there, Dr. Doug Cole. And we've published a paper about that as well. Right, so I define a sustainable career ecosystem as a variety of interdependent and interconnected actors across higher education institutions, or educational institutions to be more broad, and workplace contexts, whereby the lives and careers of individuals evolve and play out over time, with an emphasis on sustainable outcomes for the individual, organisations, and for broader society. And you'll see on the slide how certain words are in italics, and they're the ones that are drawn from the two other theories. And this was also lovely because sometimes in academia, we can see a bit of one-upmanship and everyone trying to claim something as theirs and etc. And what was lovely about this was that Professor Beatrice van der Heijden, the co-founder of Sustainable Career Theory, wrote the foreword for this book. And Professor Yehuda Barak wrote one of the chapters within the book. So there was very much support from the founders of the original theories for merging these theories together. And that actually led to a paper that we published last year together, building on that initial foundation. And we wanted to try and conceptualize what a sustainable career ecosystem might look like. So you'll see here that we capture various actors at the local, national, and international level. Here, an organisation can also refer to a university or other educational institutions. And you'll notice the interconnected and independent nature of the different actors, as well as the interplay between the person, the individual at the centre there, the context and time dimensions. Now, most importantly for today's session, you'll see that we position career practitioners as central and pivotal actors, along with individuals and organisations in determining the sustainability of the career ecosystem. And we're particularly interested in how individuals can develop various forms of employability capital, how career practitioners can support them to do this, and how external factors driven by other actors can help or hinder sustainable outcomes. And a final point to mention on this slide is that there's the potential for chance events. These are unexpected occurrences that can either be positive or negative in nature. They can also start as being one of those states and turn into the other. So, for example, you might get an unexpected promotion. It's a positive chance event, but you find that the new role's too much and it leads to burnout. That's clearly a negative outcome. Alternatively, as we saw during the COVID pandemic, you might get laid off, and that's clearly a negative chance event, or career shock, as Professor Jos Akkermans refers to in that context. But then you go and find a different job in a different industry, or you set up your own business, and you get that greater level of career satisfaction and sense of purpose and belonging, and that leads to a positive outcome. So it's important to remember that the same event, whether that's at a global level, whether that's at a country level, at a specific organisation or within a particular department, the same event can impact different people within the same group of actors in many different ways. And this is where, for me, career practitioners such as yourselves play a pivotal role, and why we position you at the centre of the sustainable career ecosystem. And if you want to know more about the underpinnings of that, then we've published this paper in the Journal of Vocational Behaviour. It's the top ranked career journal in the field, and it's open access, so you can get to that for free. Now, you'll remember that I mentioned we're interested in how individuals can develop various forms of employability capital, how career practitioners can support them to do this, and how external factors driven by other actors can help or hinder sustainable outcomes. And so the Employability Capital Growth Model, or the ECGM, it's a tool to help individuals accumulate specific forms of employability capital, consider the context and time dimensions of a sustainable career, and increase their chances of achieving specific personal outcomes. But just before I do that, one, I realise this is over the screen, so I apologise for that. And two, let me have a quick look in the chat and see what we have. No, I think we're all good. Okay, I'll carry on. So the employability capital growth model, it's underpinned by sustainable career ecosystem theory, and it captures the interplay of person, context, and time dimensions, as well as the interconnected and interdependent nature of different actors to determine the inclusivity and the sustainability of the overall career ecosystem. And you can read more about this. Again, we've got an open access publication in studies in higher education, and I've just published a book as well, Developing Employability Capital in University Students, a practical guide. Now, if we look at some of the examples of personal outcomes, you'll see things such as job attainment and quality, career progression, financial security, and well-being. And an important note here again is that it's unlikely you can have all of these at one point in time. That's not what the aim is. It's about identifying what outcomes are most important to you or your students or clients you're supporting, both now and in the future, because that will help them to work towards acquiring the resources that help them to achieve those specific outcomes. And again, they change over time. Now, of course, individuals, they're not the only actors in the career ecosystem. The next 3 slides, we're going to look at what this means for some of the other actors. And they're just examples. You might think of others. They're not meant to be an exhaustive list. So sustainable indicators for a university or educational establishment might include things like attracting students, securing funding, providing an inclusive environment, supporting career practitioners, and encouraging collaboration within the university and beyond its boundaries. We might also consider the need to prepare students for when they move into the labour market to be what Dr. Maria Jakubik calls global citizens, and to produce research offering real-world benefits. And sustainable indicators for organisations, employers, it might look like attracting and retaining talent. As Martin mentioned, we had some of the same kind of issues of particular groups dropping out at particular points in the process. So it's looking at why are they dropping out at that point and what can we do about that? Do we actually need that particular part of the process if it's causing this level of bias? Can we perhaps replace it with something that's more accessible to more people? Again, it's a commitment to diversifying the workforce. And that's moving beyond compliance with legal requirements, but really embracing that as a philosophy of wanting to have an inclusive and diverse workforce, as well as supporting employee mobility. So for instance, where I was, we had the option to move roles within the same organisation every sort of 12 to 18 months if we wanted to. And that was a great way to learn new things about the business and to, osmosis that knowledge between different departments. Other aspects you might think about are innovation, competitive advantage, financial performance, and productivity. Now, for career practitioners, here we're looking at things around accreditation, decent work conditions, good pay. And these are all things that we're talking about at the moment because, unfortunately, if we look at the pay aspect, it's generally very poor compared to many other countries and people doing similar work elsewhere. You don't need me to tell you that. You know it, you live it every day. Again, around decent work conditions, in universities, we're seeing huge funding cuts coming in. And again, they're impacting some of the careers professionals who, in my mind, are some of the most important people at the university, because the whole point is that we're producing students and graduates who are capable of knowing how to learn, but also capable of being employable at the end. And it's how we do this in an ethical way with sufficient capacity to offer tailored support to a diverse range of clients or students, and whether such support actually increases that person's employability. So, sustainable indicators for professional associations. This is around advocacy for individuals and for organisations, as well as evolving both industry and professional standards and practices. It might include providing continuing personal development, helping to facilitate human resource development. And this might be particularly valuable for individuals who are self-employed, so that they have a sense of community and opportunity to learn and knowledge share with others. And again, as career practitioners, it can be quite a lonely profession at times if you're the one person in your particular school or university. And so having that network is really important. For governments, which can range again across the local, the national, or even multinational level, if we look at things like the European Union, sustainable indicators might look like effective use of employability capital, increased tax revenue, GDP and living standards. It might also look like improvements in a population's well-being and employment figures, coupled with reductions in unemployment and underemployment rates. And it might also address factors around environmental commitments. So it's taking a really broad, entirely career ecosystem approach, and you start to see these interconnected, interdependent aspects playing out and how they evolve over time. And then, of course, we have artificial intelligence, although the intelligence part of this I still feel is debatable. As I mentioned before, the indicators on the slide are just examples. They're not an exhaustive list, but we can see just how wide-reaching the impact of AI can be in either a positive or a negative way. For instance, there's the potential to reduce bias through increased access to careers education, information, advice, and guidance, improving diversity of hires and measuring performance. But of course, there's the risk of the opposite occurring. And this is something that I saw in some research I carried out during the COVID-19 pandemic. I asked graduate recruiters in the finance industry, held interviews with them to see what it was like having to pivot really quickly from in-person to everything online. Now, they thought they would get some of the most diverse cohorts of hires that they had ever had, because they were removing the bias from the in-person part and standardizing it within the system. But of course, the complete opposite happened. They got some of the least diverse cohorts of hires, because what had actually happened was that the personal preferences and biases, unintentional or otherwise, had been encoded into the system and replicated across all of the applicants when assessing their applications and performance. So it's really important to continually evaluate this and keep looking back and making sure that what we think we're doing for the good is actually having the outcome that we want. And sometimes that's trial and error, and that is just how it goes. But it's making that that adjustment as quickly as possible once that comes to mind. So that's the theory side of things. You'll be pleased to know we're at the end of that part. And as Martin kindly mentioned, so my dear friend Dr. Elizabeth Cook, she was going to join us from Perth in Australia, but unfortunately she's come down ill today. So if you'll just bear with me, I'm going to switch across to another. Right, there we are. Then we can move. Perfect. So yes, so Elizabeth is a research associate in the Food and Environments team of Nutrition and Health Innovation Research Institute at Edith Cowan University in Australia. She's autistic and ADHD and co-chair of Edith Cowan University's Staff with Disability Network, and also chair of a wider disability network across higher education institutions in Australia. We've been working on a special issue at the moment, looking at how we can support individuals to neurodivergent individuals to flourish. And so we have a lot of overlap, and she's also writing a chapter for a book on inclusive conferences that I'm editing for next year. So obviously, I know some of her lived experiences, and she was going to talk a bit more about them. So if I'm aware of them and they're okay for sharing, I'll incorporate them in there. If I can think of some bits, I'll add them in. If not, please do reach out to her afterwards. She's absolutely brilliant, a real wealth of information, my go-to person on this particular topic. So yes, in the special issue, we're looking at what support can we do to help people flourish in their careers. And for most of us, it's managers who trust and believe in different ways of working, supportive systems that are clear, consistent, person-centered, and confidential. We don't necessarily want to have to share or disclose the adjustments that we need to our wider team, for example. Ideally, we would, and we'd feel comfortable doing that and bringing our whole selves to the workplace. But of course, that's different for different people. Unfortunately, we've seen too many examples this year of people disclosing and then being put on performance review and then fired a few months later. And clearly, that's not okay. But more broadly, again, this comes back to, are we looking at legal compliance as if we do that, we're okay? And again, the problem with legal compliance is the emphasis is on the individual to have to raise the court case against the organisation. That requires resources, time, effort, money. And people don't necessarily have that, particularly because being neurodiverse, being disabled, can often come with aspects such as additional fatigue. It's about supportive systems and inclusive design. This is the key, really, about our visible commitments and shared stories. So this idea that if something's being designed, you need to have people from that group included. There's a brilliant quote. If you make a decision about a group of people and you look around the room and nobody from that group is in the room, you should have very, very low level of confidence in what you're thinking is a good strategy. Unfortunately, I don't know the owner of that, and it wasn't me, but it's a great quote nonetheless. And again, here looking at flexibility. So it might be that someone wants to work 7 days a week, but for 2 or 3 hours a day. It might be someone wants to concertina their hours. They might need to start later in the day. They might want to have a break in the day and work again in the evening or into the night. And Elizabeth provided this quote, which is from Emma Conway at Edith Cowan University. And they say, I think the one thing that stands out for me is that my current line manager allows me to work with a level of autonomy, taking on a project or task and working through it in a way that works for me. It means I'm able to deliver over and above. They acknowledge there's different ways of doing things. They took time to understand me, that my brain has an alternative way of working, and that it can actually be an asset. I had an opportunity to demonstrate what I was capable of. Now they trust me, believe in me to deliver. And this has a huge positive impact, both professionally and personally. It just takes one opportunity with the right conditions to allow someone to shine. And I really relate to this, absolutely. But I'm conscious of time, so just going to share here what gets in the way, the barriers here. There's this fear of stigma, a reluctance to disclose, and this internalized ableism. And then there's barriers in the system of it being complex, the onus on the individual to have to request these adjustments. Manager uncertainty as well. If we're not training people who are hiring, who are doing training and development, who are managing neurodivergent individuals, then they're not aware of the brilliant ways they can contribute, but also the different ways and different setups that they will benefit from. And again, the risk here is that it's a tick box approach to inclusion. Have we met the legal guidelines? Yes, excellent, good, that's fine. Do we have neurodivergent people in our team? Yeah, well, then we're diverse. And that's really problematic. So for career professionals like yourselves, it's about inviting reflection from these individuals, affirming their strengths and offering low barrier support. And by that, sometimes it's quite hard to process a lot of information at a time. We don't have much time with clients. So if possible, providing information in advance, providing written information, but perhaps having a bit more time if you can, or splitting up over a couple of sessions to really let them understand that information. Organisations, it's about centering lived experience, asking people what they need, listening when they say what they need and believing them. And for universities and educators, it's about teaching relational employability, this model of flexibility. Now, I'm just going to wrap up here because I'm conscious that we're at the time, but what you'll be able to do is have a look at how this framework that Elizabeth has developed links to a sustainable career ecosystem. And there's some resources that you can take forward. These are mainly based in Australia, but Elizabeth's asked me to really encourage you to explore the SWAY tool, SWAY, and the lived experience-based reports. And again, here's some further reading. Elizabeth's very kindly put some of my works on there. As I say, unfortunately, I have to run, but there will be an opportunity if you want to email or if you want to connect on LinkedIn, more than happy to do that. And it's great to see some of the comments in here as well. I'll make a note of them and I'll connect on LinkedIn and reply there or type a quick reply in now. So that's me. I'm going to hand back over at this point to Martin.
Will, thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant. And thanks again for stepping into Elizabeth's shoes there in terms of that second part of the presentation as well. So many great things and takeaways there and really interesting points, both from a kind of wider theory perspective, but also really bringing it to life as well. So thank you so much, Will, and thanks for the immaculate timing as well. We're going to move on now to our next speaker, and we're going to be coming at this from a slightly different angle, starting to think about this from a school's perspective. Really pleased to have Vicky O'Connor here, who's from Westminster School in Sandwell, who's going to be talking to us about how we tailor SEND career support in schools. So Vicky, really looking forward to hearing about this. Just again to flag up before Vicky begins and whilst the slides come up, that we'll be taking a bit of a break after this presentation. So we are conscious that we've got quite a lot packed in and a reasonably long afternoon. So we'll stick a break in after this for anyone who wanted to be aware of that. So Vicky, over to you. Really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say from a sort of schools angle on this. And if you're good to go, I shall hand over to you.
Perfect. Just bear with me a second while I just share my slides.
Excellent. It's all coming through from what I can see. Yeah, looks good to me.
Hopefully you can all see that. Hi everyone, I'm Vicky O'Connor. So I do work for a specialist setting. Previous to that, I've worked across, originally started my career in further education, then moved to work in alternative provision. From there, I moved to mainstream secondary education and then ended up in a specialist setting. So worked across a lot of different settings in terms of educating. So I was a teacher, part of senior leadership team, but then had a love for careers, so moved into that area. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what careers is like in our setting and how it's quite different. Hopefully you'll have some questions that you can pop in the chat for me. So I'm going to discuss with you how we make career education work for our young people. So it is all centred around the young people themselves. So who are we? So we are the Westminster School and College. So we are a community special school. We have nearly 300 pupils on roll, spread across primary right through to post-16. So we have very small numbers in primary. We are growing year on year. So just talking to the local authority now about growing our numbers for next academic year. We also have a 19 to 25 provision, which is our specialist college, and we have 20 students on roll there. And that provision is specifically around supported internships and moving those young people closer to work. Now, all our young people have a primary need of a moderate learning difficulty. So they are working significantly below their peers, and we have a variety of needs in our setting, including sensory impairment, physical needs, medical needs, speech and language, communication difficulties, and also social, emotional and mental health difficulties as well. So a vast array of amazing young people that we get to work with every day. So, career education, we actually have to reframe the word career education in our setting. If we use the word careers, it can really scare a lot of our families. A lot of our young people, as you can see, we educate from primary, they tend to become institutionalised. They are with us sometimes from age 7 right to 25. And when we're talking about careers, that can really scare families. They see our school as a very safe space for that young person, a little bit of a haven. We're their support system. And when we're talking about future and careers, that can be very, very scary for the young people and the families. So we actually reframe our career education and we call it our futures. Every young person that we educate has a future, relevant of their needs. So our career education system is built around the child and it's very specific to each and every young person. And they will all follow different pathways depending on their needs and future aspirations. So in terms of our career programme, that could be raising their self-esteem, respecting themselves and others, equipping them with the skills they need for either work or life, preparing them for adulthood, providing them with up-to-date labour market information in accessible formats that they understand and is relevant to their needs. And we hope through our Futures programme that we create confident and independent members of the community. So our careers programme is very varied. So we will invite speakers in every Friday. We call this a Future Friday event where we get local people to come and talk to our young people about jobs that they do, skills that are needed in that job. Which goes down really well with our young people. We then do a lot of social enterprise, so making handcrafted items to sell. And we do have our own shops, which it's in the local town to the school. It's called the Westminster School, that our pupils will then work in. As part of our Futures programme, we complete travel training with our young people. If we want to move them closer to work, we need to make sure that they can navigate to work safely and be safe in the community. We are very proud that a lot of our young people do go on to get paid employment. So we do bring back our school alumni regularly. We've got a gentleman there on the picture, and that's a piece of equipment that he uses in his job. And we bring those along to inspire and motivate our young people. We do a lot of work-related learning. I will go into our curriculum in a little bit more detail, but we have a whole area called Care and Independence, which is around future preparation. We run a future fair every year at school, and we open that up to other local schools and colleges for their students that have an educational healthcare plan or are on their SEN registers, because smaller specialist settings do struggle to get providers in because providers want to reach en masse. And not all providers will have the entry, like our young people won't have the entry requirements to access those sorts of next steps. We also take our young people to lots of local colleges, social care providers, supported internship providers, inclusive apprenticeship employers to visit for their next steps. We also offer supported internships. So we have a full-time supported internship programme through our college. We work with ASDA, we work with DPD, and we work with Sandwell and Birmingham NHS Trust. And then we also have a pre-internship programme, which is a part-time internship to get them used to work etiquette, following the rules, being safe in the workplace, in school, supported by our qualified job coaches, and we work with organisations such as IKEA. All our young people will also complete vocational qualifications. So the young people that we're talking about here will not leave us with GCSEs. They will not sit those traditional qualifications that employers, some colleges, universities will recognise. So we try to upskill them in other areas such as first aid qualifications, manual handling, and things like that, to try to make them a little bit more employable and to enhance their CV and employment outcomes. We take students weekly to workplace tours so they can visit different industries and actually see the local labour market rather than read about it, because this is more suitable for our young people. I've mentioned we have our own Westminster School that our students work in, so they will make the products and then they will go to the shop to practice their customer service. They also do a customer service vocational course while they are there. We do regular CV and interview support. We are really proud of our work experience programme. So nationally, it's really difficult to get work experience for young people, especially if they have any additional needs and they're educated in a specialist setting. So we've just looked at the data for last year, and we had 156 students that accessed a work placement, and that's a 1 or 2 day a week work placement, not just a 1 week or a 2 week. They are getting out there and they are getting industry experience. We also deliver Duke of Edinburgh and Prince's Trust, and we employ our own career advisor that is a full-time member of the school community, which really helps us because she really knows the young people. Some of our young people really struggle to communicate, so she may go and observe them before that important one-to-one interview. Families are really involved with that process, and she sees our young people from year 7 until 25 every year, so we can ensure that their career action plans are changed accordingly to different stages of their life. So futures or careers is heavily involved in all our curriculum. So the main area that it's involved in is we have an area of curriculum called My Care and Independence. So we don't teach the normal maths, English, science. We have areas of learning. So within My Care and Independence, we have a care element. So this is making sure that they can look after their body. So in terms of work, it's what they would wear for an interview, how they would travel there safely, how they can self-advocate for themselves in terms of these are my needs, this is the support I need in the workplace, these are my medical needs. We then have a skills for life area of our curriculum. So this is preparing them for adulthood, things like maintaining a home, purchasing for the home, food, nutrition, diet. And then we have making a positive contribution section of that curriculum, and that's all around skills, so the soft skills that they will need to develop in education in order to then practice those in the workplace. It's not just that area of learning that careers or futures is linked to, so we have other areas of learning as well, and careers and preparing our young people for adulthood is threaded through every single area of learning. Our young people that I'm talking about are so far away from the labour market that we need to do everything we can at every step of their journey in order for them to gain paid employment in the future. So we have other areas of learning such as my community, my communication, my creativity, my thinking and my well-being, and that is all linked to ensuring that they are prepared for adulthood. So in my thinking, it may look like we'll take them to banks or building societies. We support them to open bank accounts. So when they do get a job, they can get their salary paid into there. We'll work with lots of employers where they'll set projects around science or maths. So it may be a recycling project or a green living project. We do work with STEM employers where they'll come in and create projects again for our young people to develop those employability skills. Within my communication, this is where we support with those job applications, CVs. We might visit workplaces and read leaflets or signage. We might visit employers and then they'll do some interviews with them. My community is about developing those employability skills safely off-site. As I've mentioned, through Duke of Edinburgh, through Forest School, through travel training, we are very fortunate that we have so many My Community days where our young people get to go off-site and experience these things and develop into amazing, well-rounded young adults. In my wellbeing, we get visits and talks from health professionals. So we've always got health professionals come into school, so we utilise them, talk to our young people about what career you're working in, what skills are needed, how they can practice them in school and at home. We have local visits to leisure centres, we go to sports events, and again, it's all around developing those skills for adult life. In my creativity, we will visit the Hippodrome, some local theatres. They'll do an arts award. We get lots of speakers in from the creative sector. We will visit galleries, concert halls. So again, we try to link everything in terms of futures to every area of our curriculum. We also have a small number of students with very, very complex needs that will never get paid jobs in the future. They will more than likely need to be supported by adult social care. But we don't exclude them from our futures programme because, as I said at the beginning, every young person we work with has a future. So they will still access the Future Fair to talk to relevant providers for them with communication support and symbols and widgets that we use. They will still work in Westminster with familiar staff that know them. And we get employers in, such as we had a construction company in the other day, and we had a sensory construction day, and the sounds of the construction site were playing into the school hall. There was a huge image of a construction site on the board, and that employer simply walked round while the students were creating towers out of Lego. We had some foam bricks, and the employer spoke to our young people, which is a skill in itself for some of our young people to talk to unfamiliar adults. So we don't exclude any young person throughout the whole of their career education process. So where does labour market information come in? So I've already mentioned that labour market information for our young people is quite hard to digest. It's not always in accessible formats. It's not easy to understand. So on a whole, we take them to local industries. We bring the employers to them to get the information that they need. In a previous role to this, I supported all Senkos and special schools across the whole of the Black Country. While I was in that role, I created a site called Your Future Black Country, which is a labour market information website aimed at young people with SEND that are educated in specialist settings that may need some communication support and things broken down. In this particular website, you can find entry-level roles rather than those roles that would need those academic levels to enter. From this, we presented it to the Career and Enterprise Company, and they funded a lot of other LEP areas to create their own Your Future to support more SEND pupils across the whole of England. So it's a really well-used site, really valued by specialist settings, just to try to make labour market information a little bit more accessible for those young people that may not be cognitively able. And then where does vocational profiling come in for us? So again, in a previous role, I created a Black Country vocational profile. So across the Black Country in my region, we was finding that transitions were becoming very, very difficult. So young people that were educated in a specialist setting were moving to an FE setting in foundation learning, and they were actually just repeating everything that they did in the specialist setting, and there was no progression for them. So I brought all the professionals together from across the Black Country in terms of what information do you need to know about these young people, and we created a specific Black Country vocational profile to be used with all students within EHCP across the borough, just to ensure that every setting is getting the same paperwork. And we use this in our setting. So we vocationally profile all our young people in terms of jobs and careers and what they're interested in. So you can see from this snapshot here, if you can, it's quite small, but this particular student has clicked here that they're interested in shop and cafe work. And then I'm just going to talk you through the process of what we then do. So we have a graduated approach to our work experience. So before I started there, the school was, if a student on their vocational profile was saying, right, I want to work in a shop or a cafe, they would put them in a shop or a cafe. We was finding that those placements were breaking down quite quickly. The employer didn't know enough about the young person didn't know enough about the employer or that industry. So we have now created a graduated approach with lots of different sectors that our young people do gain paid work in. So they will start off, if a young person is saying to us, we're interested in working in retail, we will get someone into school to talk to them about what's it like to work in retail. We will then check in with them. How does that sound? Is that something you're interested in? Sometimes they'll say, no, I didn't think it was going to be like that. I don't want to work in retail. And that's absolutely fine. But it saved us going through that process of disappointment for that young person. If they say yes, we then move them to something else. So they might do some role play in school, supporting with social enterprise or the summer fair. Then we might move them to our own shop, Westminster, with familiar staff. And then as they're moving through these processes, we're constantly assessing them in terms of, are they ready for that next step? And I'll talk about how we do that in a little while. And then we will put them in that external work experience. Now, we do this for lots of different sectors. So we've got for retail, for hospitality, for mechanics, facility management, for ground maintenance. And again, it is that step-by-step approach, baby steps to ensure that everything around that young person is right for them to succeed. So we've got construction as well and childcare. During each of those steps, they will have a little check-in with their tutor, with the career advisor, with myself, with a member of SLT. We've got like a whole rota of different staff that are involved just to assess how that young person is getting on and are they ready to move forward. We don't want to move them forward too soon and set them up to fail. This is all about improving their confidence and their motivation and their success in their career journey. We have lots of visuals around school as well, so our young people know what industries are available to them. We also have lots of pupil voice sessions. So if we haven't got a certain sector covered, we'll ask them, what industries do you need us to cover? And then we'll work in terms of employer engagement to get that graduated approach for that sector set up. As start of the process as well, we also have lots of internal jobs. So this is about starting on that graduated approach and seeing how our students cope with that. So some quite eventful names here. So we have a trash trekker, a toast technician, We have a post-lunch clean-up captain, lots of different internal jobs that are supported with familiar members of staff before they move through that process. And these are really, really useful for us to assess our students and their capabilities, and actually what areas for development and how can we support them to move through our graduated approach. Just a few more here. Now, once we've had that career talk at the start in terms of, right, we've got someone in from retail, you've spoken with them, yes, I'm happy to start on my graduated approach, we will do what's called a pre-work rubric. And here we assess the students with their tutor or teacher or support member of staff to see how ready they are for work. And we assess them on a few different areas. If we ask to score 21 or more in this. If they score below that, we will then work with that young person to try and improve that score before we put them on that placement. And this is to ensure that that placement doesn't break down and it's the right thing for the person. So we score them on their ambition and motivation, their confidence, their self-awareness, their communication and socialisation, their learning adaptability and resilience, their independence, the travelling and the organising. So here's some data from our pre-work rubric. So we found that lower work rubrics was around travelling and confidence, and then in terms of self-awareness, communication, socialisation, it's quite average scores, and ambition, motivation, learning ability, resilience and independence were all quite high. This is data from last year. So from these scores, we then changed our curriculum to ensure that the skills that our young people were lacking in were highlighted and could be practiced throughout our areas of learning to ensure that we were bringing more young people closer to our graduated approach. So some of the interventions that we did with young people, which helped them, we created the travel training programme for travelling. In terms of confidence, we did a lot of role playing and social stories with them. In terms of ambition and motivation, so we got some of our alumni back in to talk to them about what it was like to work. And hopefully, and to be fair, it did work, and we had a lot more students gaining access to the first step on the graduated approach. And then again, before a placement starts or they move through that graduated approach, we will then vocationally profile that young person. We constantly revisit this vocational profile to make sure that the pupil is centre of everything that we do. With parent permission, we also share that with the employers that they go to ensure that the employers are getting that information that they need, so they know how that young person learns best and how they can differentiate the support in the workplace in order to get the best out of their potential new employee. So other than the vocational profile, we also then share with the employer a one-page profile. So here we detail what the student's learning need is, and then we give them examples of how they can meet their needs in the workplace. So that might be a young person really needs routine, and they may take some time to process certain changes. So we will advise them to provide a visual or a written schedule for them, and we'll help them create that written or visual schedule. And we'll let them know that if there's any changes in the day for that work experience student, can you let them know with as much notice as possible? So we try and preempt as much as possible any issues that can come up within the workplace by giving the employer as much information and support as possible so the young person can flourish. And then we obviously share that pupil information so they get to see how to work with that young person best. We ask the employer to give them a buddy or a mentor of who they will be working with. We make sure that they're clarifying what job tasks that young person can do. So then we can think, yes, that young person will be able to do that, or actually they can, but they may need some support. And then we come in to support that employer. And it's really helping employers become more inclusive along the way. We're constantly creating resources for employers to use with neurodivergent employees. So it's not just helping the working experience students, it's actually helping their larger workforce as well. And we help the employer to ensure that the pupil induction is inclusive. And again, a lot of employers have adapted that and are now using it within their recruitment processes. During any work placement, we do daily calls just to check that the students are okay. Some of them do these independently. Sometimes we have job coaches on site. We'll always check in with the pupil before. Are they ready for work? Has anything happened? Are they feeling a little bit anxious today? We'll do post talks after the work experience just to check, has anything happened that day that actually they need some time to process it, or they may not have understood something and they want to talk that through. We just want to make sure that that young person feels fully supported. We do 2 quality assurance visits per academic year for each employer as well, and that's a great way for the employers to chat with us about actually how they can be more inclusive as an employer. We do half-termly visits to the employer and the pupil just to catch up, what are they doing well, what are the areas for development, and then we complete an in-work rubric twice a year. So you've saw the pre-work rubric, how we assess are they ready for work, but we also then complete an in-work rubric, which I'll show you in a little while. So in terms of the quality assurance process, the reason that we've put that into place is to evaluate the quality of the work placements that's provided to young people. So a few years ago, I was advised that some of the young people were doing quite menial tasks, and actually we wasn't stretching them enough to develop their work-related skills. So we decided to put a QA process in place in order to support the young person, but also support that employer as well. And it is a very supportive process, and we have from the quality assurance visits, and I'll talk about it in a little while, but we have had lots of offers of employment, so they're a great way to open up that dialogue and support with the employer. So during our QA visit, we will assess the safety and accessibility. Is everything safe for our young people, accessible? If it isn't, how can we help the employer ensure that it is? We'll look at communication and instructions, so focusing on evaluating the clarity and the effectiveness of communication between the employer and our students. We'll look at the engagement to support, evaluating the level of engagement and support provided by the employer to facilitate that student's learning and development. We'll look at the quality of activities, so we'll assess the relevance, the variety, the progression. We may also work with the employer to suggest other tasks so our students can progress. And then we'll look at the progression and development, so track the students' progression over time. We'll get the employer's voice and also the pupil voice as well. And then our in-work rubric assessment. So I created this rubric with employers from across the Black Country and the wider West Midlands, from all our industries that either had a skill gap, they were struggling to recruit. So I think there was about 23 employers, and I asked them on a round table over a number of months, what skills are needed within your sectors? And we came up with these skills are needed in whatever sector that you enter. So this is how we now assess our young people. So we have creative and innovation, problem solving, using initiative, integrity, work ethic, customer service, teamwork, listening and speaking, efficiency and productivity, information technology, job-specific tools, and respecting diversity and inclusion, reading and writing in the workplace, functional maths in the workplace, and workplace safety. So when we're going out twice a year, we will assess our students on these skills. We will sit down with our employer and our young person, and we will ask the employer to assess our young people against this work ready rubric. Again, where our young people are scoring a little bit lower or need some support, we then work with our curriculum leads to ensure those skills are embedded across our areas of learning to bring them closer to the labour market and to accessing that paid employment. So in terms of a deep dive into the data, this is from last year. So efficiency and productivity, maths and reading and writing scored a little bit lower, but we actually made changes to the curriculum based on that. And we had some employers that come to work with our curriculum leads of how they could change their areas of learning to try and improve those certain skills. I've just looked at the data again for this year, and that is looking a lot better. So it's showing that the changes that we're making to the curriculum is working. From this, we then create a work readiness report. So this report goes out to our parents. Now, there's a lot of anxiety with our parents about letting their young people work. It's not just anxiety, sometimes it can be benefit related, lots of other reasons. A lot of times parents are just really scared to let their young people get a paid job. And sometimes our parents will feed back to us that, oh, our young person can't work. So we send the work rubrics home. So this is pictures of them in their workplace when we've gone to visit them, their work ready rubric scores that employers have given them. We highlight what their strengths are, areas for development, how parents at home can support with those areas for development. So we'll give them suggestions of how they can improve teamwork within the home environment, how they can improve efficiency and productivity within the home environment. The students' feedback's on there and the employer feedback's on there. We found this really useful to get our parents on side in terms of our careers and future education, and to really buy into futures as an area of curriculum and how it really supports their child to develop.
Vicky, sorry to interject, just a bit conscious of time, so if it's possible to wrap in the next couple of minutes, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Course. And then obviously at the end of the placement, I'm nearly finished anyway, at the end of the placement we then vocationally profile again, and we know this process works because we do get outcomes. So in our area in Sandwell, 0.7% known to local authority with an EHCP get paid employment. So this year alone, we've still got employment planning meetings coming up. We've had 7 offers of employment just from our leavers. We've only got 15 leavers this year. And we do that through job carving, supporting employers with inclusive recruitment from their advert to retention, and giving them that continued support. And from that, obviously, every SEND young person is very individual, and we was having a lot of schools come in and asking us for support in terms of, can you come and look at our curriculum? Can you come and help us? So from that, we founded what I founded in 2025 this year, Included Careers, so a careers consultancy for SEND, and we're working with the West Midlands Combined Authority at the moment and some Black Country and West Midlands schools in terms of setting up a programme that works for them and their young people to move their young people closer to paid work. And that's me. Thank you. Sorry, I went over a little bit.
Don't worry at all. And that was absolutely fascinating and also incredibly comprehensive what you guys are doing. So thank you so much for presenting that. And there's a ton of insights there that whilst you were focusing on your school context, I think that people will be able to take into all sorts of other parts of their work in all sorts of parts of education and beyond. So thank you, Vicky. That was fantastic. Okay, there was a couple of questions. If you're okay to jump on those in the chat, Vicky, if you have a moment just to reply to 1 or 2 of those. You answered some of them, I think, in your content, but that would be great. So I'm just going to give us a little break now, and we're going to restart promptly at 25 past. So so we have a 9-minute break. So hopefully that's enough time to go and make a cup of tea, run around the garden, or do what you need to do. We will return and start again at 25 past, and look forward to speaking to you at that point with our next couple of speakers. And again, thanks to Will and Vicky in particular for the really great content so far this afternoon. So we will see you again. If you don't leave the Zoom, I would suggest just stay off camera and things, and then rejoin us again at 25 past. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Just starting to get things lined up. So, Claire, I can see you've appeared already. If you want to get your slides queued up, Claire, and then I'll just give everyone sort of 30 seconds to be back and around, and then we will get started on our next sessions.
Is that visible?
Yeah, that's all showing perfectly well. Yeah, excellent. Vicky's put some answers to the questions there in the chat. If anyone hasn't already seen those, so thank you, Vicky, for doing that. That's fantastic. So hopefully you've all had your questions answered. So, right, let's crack on with our next two speakers. Real pleasure to welcome Claire Toogood from the wonderful organisation that is AGCAS, which I also work at. Claire's my colleague and leads our research and publications work. And this is an area of work in which AGCAS has been really committed for a long, long time and has been producing this annual report called What Happens Next, looking at the outcomes of disabled graduates. So Claire's going to take us through that report. And thank you for joining us, Claire. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say on this important topic.
Super, thank you. So yes, I don't need to introduce AGCAS and I don't need to share the wonderful work that we do because Martin's already done that. But for those who haven't met me before, my name is Claire Toogood, and as Martin said, I head up research and publications at AGCAS. I'm going to be focusing on our What Happens Next report, and this specific edition of the report was focusing on the outcomes of disabled graduates from the 21 to 22 academic year. As you all know, we have a little lag in HESA data in higher education, so it takes a while, but that's the most recent data set at the current time. And as Martin alluded to, this report is part of a really long-standing report series. We've been doing this for 2 decades, and I'm really pleased to share that it is widely recognised and cited as an authoritative source on outcomes for disabled graduates. Earlier reports have been cited in parliamentary briefings, the Buckland Review, and Disabled Student Commitment. We can be found on the OFS website. And we also, in 2024, found that we were approached by the Welsh Parliament's Equality and Social Justice Committee for some work that they were doing, which led to us being part of their Anything's Achievable, the Right Support project, tackling the disability employment gap, which was published in early 2025 for anyone who'd like to seek that out and have a look at it. However, despite the fact we've been doing this for 2 decades, we have most definitely evolved over that time. And the 2025 report particularly marks a shift in approach. So for the first time, we've evaluated gender and ethnic background alongside disability type. And we're trying there to really shine a spotlight on the notable challenges that some particular groups of graduates face. Another new feature of our 2025 research was the inclusion of graduate voice questions. So for those who might be not as familiar with the Graduate Outcome Survey, it collects some information on whether graduates feel their activity is meaningful, whether it fits with their future plans, and also whether they're using what they learned in their studies. And that's really important that we kind of capture that nuance around the graduate experience and outcomes. And the report overall is using data from the Graduate Outcome Survey collected by HESA, which it collects data from graduates across the UK on their activities 15 months after they finish their course, for anyone who doesn't use that data set more regularly. So we kind of have this slight time lag, as I mentioned. These are the 21, 22 graduates. We're asking what they do 15 months later, and then we're able to analyse and publish that. So we have to kind of bear in mind the context. Previous reports kind of dealt with the pandemic period quite specifically, but I think we're now seeing the outcomes just the other side of that, really, as things were sort of settling down as much as they ever do in the labour market. And as in previous years, we found that at all levels of study, there is a disability employment gap. So this slide is looking at total disability employment gap. And what that means is that we're looking at not just full-time employment, but also part-time employment, voluntary employment, and anyone who has said that they're in further study with employment as well. And we calculate disability employment gap by comparing the figure of all those things totaled up for the whole disabled graduate population with the whole graduate population with no known disability. So a gap of 4% means that an additional 4% of disabled graduates are not in any form of employment when compared to graduates with no known disability. And there's a couple of things there. I'm saying no known disability because we have to recognise that some graduates may not have shared a disability with their institution while they were in study for a wide variety of reasons, which would mean that they didn't fall into this data set in the disabled graduate population. And so that can be a factor, but it's hopefully within the noise on this report because of the scale of the data collection here. You can also see some differences across different groups here. So our first degree students are perhaps, graduates are perhaps seeing a slight increase in that total employment gap. Postgraduate taught degrees slightly decreasing over the present time. But having looked at this going back quite some way, I would say that what we can rely on is that the gap is consistent and it's always present. Our postgraduate research degree, they bounce around a bit more. They're the smallest group. So we end up with more variety in their numbers. But again, the gap is consistent and always present. And obviously that is not the outcome that we would want to see. We do also look at full-time employment specifically, and that's not because we think it is the best outcome or the outcome that everyone should be working towards, but it is one of the most common outcomes. So it allows us to look at the data in a little bit more detail. And in 21-22, you can see again that the proportion of disabled graduates in full-time employment was lower than the proportion of graduates with no known disability. So in the dark purple, you've got the disabled graduate population. The lighter purple is the graduate population with no known disability. And again, there's a gap at every level of qualification there, and that gap varies slightly across those levels of qualification. Again, not the outcome that we would hope to see. But more positively, what we did find this year is that disabled graduates were generally as likely as graduates with no known disability to feel their graduate activity is meaningful. And findings like that are the reason that we chose to explore that graduate voice in these in the report and to bring in those questions to understand not just statistical outcomes, but also how those outcomes are perceived and understood by the graduates themselves. And I'll come back to the rest of the graduate voice questions in a couple of slides' time. We also noted in the report that levels of student disclosure are increasing across higher education. So we are finding that more students, as they come into university, or even potentially before that, are sharing a disability with their institution and accessing support around that. And we also noted in the report that typically we see slightly higher levels of low or medium skilled employment amongst the disabled graduate population when compared to graduates with no known disability. I mentioned earlier as well that we were also able to explore some elements of intersectional identity in the report. And this year we found that disabled graduates have lower rates of full-time employment than graduates with no known disability across all ethnic backgrounds. So you could look at any of the ethnic background groupings that HISA collects and find that disabled graduates would typically have outcomes that were lower in terms of their full-time employment than graduates with no known disability. But white disabled graduates are more likely to be in full-time employment than disabled graduates from any other ethnic background. So we see that perhaps some groups experience some sort of double disadvantage there, where actually it creates an even more challenging journey into the workplace if that's where they're hoping to go. Disclosure also varied by ethnic background and by gender as well. Which was quite interesting. So white graduates and graduates from mixed ethnic backgrounds were notably more likely to have shared a disability whilst at university than Black or Asian graduates or those from other or unknown ethnic backgrounds. And that wouldn't necessarily stand as being true at a population level. So it may be, again, that fewer people feel able to come forward and access support or may not know of that support within their institution. Again, potentially affecting the outcomes that they then go on to achieve. When we look at gender, again, as with ethnic background, we found that across all genders that disability gap is consistent. So disabled graduates have lower rates of full-time employment than graduates with no known disability. And in terms of that sharing of disability, male graduates here are notably less likely to have disclosed or shared their disability whilst at university than any other gender group. We also saw something really significant around disabled graduates whose gender identity had changed since birth. So if that was the case, then that group experienced full-time employment levels that were 14% lower than disabled graduates with an unchanged gender identity. Now, I'm really sorry about the clunky wording here, doing the best I possibly can with HESA data, but it doesn't collect how a graduate or student, as they were at the time of collecting the data, would prefer to identify. So all that I can say is that this is somebody within this group who has said to their institution when signing up and filling out their personal data that they no longer identify as the same gender as they did at birth. I can't then, unfortunately, put them into the group that they would prefer to identify with. So that's concerning, that significant group is there. Significant gap is there. And then we also find that when we review the data by disability type, autistic female graduates have an unemployment rate more than double that of graduates with female graduates with no known disability. So we're starting to dig there into some of the specific groups within this report. And I would encourage you to go and read the wider report, which has a lot more detail on particular groups and how they might be experiencing disability employment gaps. I'm just drawing out some of the most noticeable groups here that we could see in the data. Coming back to graduate voice, I already mentioned that disabled graduates are as likely as graduates with no known disability to feel their graduate activity is meaningful at a population level. That's true, and that's really positive. However, disabled graduates are actually less likely to agree that their current activity fits with their future plans. So though they're seeing meaning there, they're not necessarily seeing that alignment towards the future that they want. And when we look at the extent to which the disabled graduate population felt that they were using the learning from their studies, we saw really varied outcomes. So we had autistic graduates and graduates with mental health conditions generally less likely to agree that they were using their learning. And deaf and hearing impaired graduates, graduates with mobility and physical disabilities or specific learning differences, actually more likely to agree that they were using the learning from their studies than graduates with no known disability. So within that, we see the importance of actually not necessarily considering this as a large group and actually breaking that down again to make sure that we are not just assuming that all disabled students and graduates would be behaving in one particular way or experiencing certain outcomes. We know that's not the case, and actually we can dig into that a little bit with this data and pull out some specific areas of focus. So Martin hasn't reappeared, so I think I'm okay for time for a moment. We made some recommendations, obviously, around what should be done following this data and what we need to explore from here. And the first of those is really focused on the further work that we need to consider and ensure that disabled graduates can access and secure the activities and employment that help them work towards their future plans. So we want to support that alignment rather than simply being in work. Actually, is it helping you get to where you want to go? And how can we ensure that that takes place for all graduates? We also noted that all stakeholders should consider how to effectively and collaboratively support and resource appropriate higher education, careers and employability activity that works towards reducing and ultimately eliminating employment gaps for disabled graduates, recognising, of course, there is a resource squeeze at the moment, but that this is a really critical area and we need to ensure that collaboration is supported across the sector. We highlighted the need for further work around that intersectional disadvantage among disabled graduates. We know that we didn't explore every single personal characteristic that might exist. Other work's recently come out around social background and other aspects that would definitely have a further impact. But even pulling out the characteristics that we did, we could see those very different experiences for different groups. So those collecting, using and publishing that institutional and sector data should also be considering whether their approach is measuring and incorporating intersectional disadvantage, or whether that's getting lost in bigger groupings where we're perhaps not seeing that emerging. And then finally, we wanted further research and data on the experiences and outcomes of autistic graduates. This is a repeated call, and we did call for this last year as well, following some challenging outcomes for that group after the pandemic. And we highlighted the need for this to be really collaborative, co-created work that absolutely centres the autistic graduate voice in that. So that's something that we are certainly exploring in our own research activities at the moment, but we'd encourage other people to be doing the same. I've just highlighted as well, it was a really quick tour through the report. There's a lot of detail in there, so please do go and have a look at it. It is open access. linked via the slides, which I guess will be sent out later, but also available directly on the AGCAS website. And even though we're a membership organisation, it's open access because it has such huge sector value that we want everybody to be able to read, interpret and act on it. We've also created a summary report this year. If the 60-page report is perhaps a little much for a tea break, there's a 10-page version that you can have a look at and take away those main headlines, and also an audio summary too, to make sure that this is as accessible as possible in another new development this year. We also linked back to the 2024 report, which, as I say, had a specific pandemic context, and out to some other recent work around positive action that would perhaps support if you are looking to intervene in certain ways with your disabled students and graduates, how you can do that in a way that works within your environment. It's been highlighted in our toolkit. And then finally, just quickly to say that this is also being shared more widely. I'll be talking to the National Association of Disability Practitioners next month, and over the summer to the University Mental Health Advisors Network as well. They're very much following our own advice and recommendations here, that this is collaborative and we need to be sharing this amongst all the groups that are working with students and graduates that can make a difference. So yes, thank you very much. I'm afraid I completely lost sight of the chat during that, but I'll go and have a peek for any questions, and happy to pick those up as they come in.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you, Claire. I'm bang on time, so perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, hope you all found that useful. And this is as Claire said, this is a really important topic for us at AGCAS, and one where universities at the moment are, financially under a lot of pressure at the moment, but we still want them to keep a really, really clear focus on this. For anyone who's interested as well in intersectional data, the Office for Students now provide this super granular data by institution and by course, where you can drill down both to outcomes by different characteristics, but also what's called ABC data, which is effectively a kind of agglomerated intersectional data set that's kind of split into quintiles, and you can see the differences in there. And that's often where you see the biggest differences in outcomes is where that intersectional data sits. So just building on the point Claire made there. Thanks, everybody. Moving on to our final speaker, Jules. So Jules, if you're okay to get your slides up. So Jules Benton is Chief Executive of Cosmic Cactus, and he's going to be talking to us about strategies for inclusive practice in careers counselling. So we're really looking forward to hearing you as our final speaker, Jules, and then we'll get into some discussion and breakouts before we wrap up. So thanks very much for coming along today. Appreciate your input, and I shall hand over to you now.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk from the perspective of practitioners, so delivering career guidance, career counselling. I am Jules. My background is I have been a career development professional for far too long. I currently still deliver to people, so I work in specialist settings and with people who are not within a setting, so special schools, specialist colleges, alternative provision, and like I said, people who are excluded or home educated. I also deliver the professional certificate for the CDI around reflective practice on working with people with an impairment, health condition, or a learning support need. So what I wanted to do today is just to flag up some things for reflection, and then a very quick little bit of fun, hopefully, for people. And I have put in my slide deck a whole number of resources. So I'm not going to talk through them in any detail, but they will be with you for a takeaway. So first and foremost, I just wanted to point out that disability is very normal. It's part of being human. It is something that most of us in our lives will encounter. It is not other. So when we put it apart, that becomes an issue in itself for us, and it does cause anxiety within career development professionals, and part of the training I do is to try and reduce that anxiety for them, because labelling people adds an anxiety for us as practitioners, and labelling can be useful for diagnosis, for finding out stuff that might help you, for finding your tribe. However, it isn't always useful for ourselves. Some people also don't like the word disability, but in a very geeky way, I just wanted to point out that disability in itself is not a deficit word. It means set apart, differently abled. So the dis prefix is not negative, but our societal perception is that the dis bit is negative. However, most of our support systems and access to funding are based around the word disability. So I feel it's very important to use it with my younger clients coming through into further and higher education, into work, into other activities in adult life, because they need to be familiar with what that word means and how it can support them to access what they need. So when, as a career development professional, we're working with people, really we're looking at beyond what society puts on people. And it matters because, as both Vicky and Claire pointed out, there is a massive gap. And I'm not going to go through the stats because some of them are the same as yours, Claire. However, it is significantly more difficult for people who are disabled to gain parity of employment, learning, access to other opportunities. And this may be stating the obvious. However, I think it's really important to point out that when we are talking about career guidance, career counselling, we talk to people about choices. So in the same way that Vicky was saying that careers can be quite a scary word for families and for younger people, the idea of choice and the idea of planning, particularly independently, can also be very scary and something that people are very unpracticed in. And it is really important for us, as part of our strategy for working with people inclusively, to make sure that people understand they have choice and how to make those choices. And that may require practice. Lots of our young people who are disabled have a label of some kind of development delay, and it is simply that. So the delay is also going to be in the development of their career thinking, and we need to factor that in as a strategy in order to be inclusive. So rather than thinking that people only have a pathway, we're very keen on labelling pathways for disabled people, or that there should be a good fit, one thing for disabled people. We need to be working with people to understand that there is choice. Because an option, and we talk about options, but many of the disabled young people that I work with do not feel they have options and are told what to do, whether that's by people who fund them, by well-meaning adults in their lives, whoever. They do not feel they have options. And an option is something that you can choose to do in preference to alternatives. So part of the strategy around inclusion for us is to reflect on whether we are couching our career guidance in terms of people understanding choice and options. I am going to now ask you just to think about perception. And I'm going to ask you to type in the chat the word that you hear.
More. 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 More.
So that is one word. Just stick in the chat what you hear. So we have law, more, near, more, Moral. Any advance on that? The word was actually Yanni. Lots of people frequently hear laurel or moral. And I think because it was quite quiet, that's probably why you're hearing part of the word. But we all hear it differently. There is an explainer about why that happens. It also works that if you see somebody saying a word and they move their mouth differently, you hear a different word. The reason I'm asking people to reflect on that is because perception and senses play a massive part in how we navigate our lives. And we all feel that we are normal in what we hear, in what we see, in what we experience. I ask people just to think about, as part of their guidance strategy, ask other people what they perceive, check properly what they have heard. When we're communicating, we need to check with people that what we are trying to communicate is what they are understanding. And we do that less frequently with many disabled people, because for lots of disabled people, communication, whether that's about their expressive language, whether they lack words, whether it's about their processing, the time it takes them to respond in that cyclical thing that we do where we speak, send a message, somebody sends us a message back after listening and processing, and then we repeat that cycle. Communication can be lost, and we rely heavily on effective communication. Perception is everything in communication, and we often think we have communicated, and actually that is an illusion in itself, because people understand differently. And if your brain works differently or your body works differently, which might be part of an impairment, a health condition, your mental health, you're going to understand differently. We also often attribute lack of mental capacity to people who lack words, or to people who we struggle to communicate with or to understand how their brains or their bodies work. We should always presume capacity. So I've put in some slides about mental capacity and ask people, as part of their toolkit, to always assume capacity and do everything we are asked to do. So support people to understand information, to be able to communicate back to us, to make a decision, allow people to make unwise decisions if they have capacity to make a choice, in the same way as we would their non-disabled peers. There are occasions when a best interest decision is needed. However, for the vast majority of our clients, they have capacity to make choices. They may need us to just do things a little bit differently. They may need us to teach them about making mistakes. We often are afraid to let disabled people make mistakes. So that might be something we have to coach people in, or support people to get some help to do that before they are able to engage in career planning and decision making. And anxiety is huge among many of my clients, and that's for all sorts of reasons. It can be anxiety about the future, anxiety about adult life, it can be anxiety about meeting a stranger. So again, as part of inclusive practice, encourage people to understand what we do and how we do it, and that we can do it differently for each individual. So simple things like why we are asking questions and being explicit about it, that it's not a test, it's to find out what's in people's heads so that we can suggest things that might be useful for them, can really reduce anxiety. All the mindfulness techniques as well, do not be afraid to step outside your normal box. And, you know, I've often done breathing with people. I take a sensory toolkit with me, lots of fiddly things and stuff to do if people feel more regulated when they are doing something while communicating with me. Don't overlook that speech is very difficult for lots of people. As a profession, we tend to be in our comfort zone with it. For lots of people, speaking is an issue. So again, practice other ways of communicating to supplement speech and voice. I've just put a couple of little quotes there from people. You know, and it is a difficult one for many, many people. And we should not assume that because somebody is not speaking to us, that they do not have thoughts, ideas, aspirations, plans, choices that they want to make in their heads. Time. Include people by giving them enough time. If you are uncomfortable with silence, practice being silent. Find yourself a guinea pig to practice with. We all process at different speeds. And like I said, when we are trying to communicate effectively, if we have tried, waited, checked if someone needs more time, repeated or rephrased, and still somebody is unable to respond, then own it. You know, we all say things in the wrong way sometimes. Sorry, I didn't word that very well. I'm going to ask you a different question. In the resource set, I've put you mine and Chris's book, which goes into stuff, strategies and things we do in a lot more detail. I've also put some really useful websites. This one's lovely, gives templates for challenging decisions which might be discriminatory. A very nice thing on neurodiversity that HSBC did, which I would recommend watching. It's very much about neurodiversity as an asset. A film from non-speaking autistic people, which is very powerful and great. Some stuff on selective mutism, because lack of words is something we really struggle with. And a bunch of other stuff that you can use. So I'm not going to go through it all. Oh, my ideas for sensory toolkits are free or low cost. So loads of information and tools in there. And I will also, because I didn't think to do it before, Martin, but I will add in the reflective practice training link. And I will also put in a couple of examples which might illustrate what Claire was talking about, of people who really struggle to engage in education learning work despite the fact that they're incredibly able. So Jason Arday and Luke Nadin, for anybody who would like to Google them in advance, but I'll add that and resend the slide deck.
Awesome, thanks Jules. That was fantastic as well, with loads of really detailed and useful practical stuff about the actual, like you say, delivery with practitioners. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, and loads of food for thought in that as well.
All the resources have links in as well. So I've just been asked that question, where can we find the resources? I've put links in all of them.
Yeah, and we'll be sharing the slides after the event as well. So we will share those with everybody who's here, and hopefully lots of useful stuff. There's resources in most people's slide decks actually, so a wealth of stuff for you to use. Thanks so much, Jules. Thanks for wrapping us up really brilliantly there, and again for all of our speakers all the way through. We've had some brilliant input from all of our, from Will, from Vicky, from Claire, from Jules, and we're going to now sort of hand it over to you in some breakout rooms. So if you'd like to sort of bring yourself on camera and things, if you're comfortable doing that, and what we'll be doing shortly is Jill will be firing you off into breakout rooms. We've got a set of questions for you, 4 questions, which we'll also add into the chat in a second, but let me just quickly run through them so that you've got a bit of a sense of them. And we're going to give you about 15 minutes or thereabouts in your groups just to discuss these, and then we'll have the groups will come back and we'll feedback perhaps some of the headlines from each group. So if you could also, once you're in your groups, if you could appoint a spokesperson, that would be tremendous, who can perhaps grab a couple of notes of the headlines from the group and feed those back to us all. So the 4 questions are, firstly, what are the significant takeaways for you from the presentations you've heard today? So what are your main takeaways? Secondly, what pressures and challenges are faced by practitioners and researchers in this area? Thirdly, how can reflective practice, supervision and support strengthen our practice? And then finally, what can we learn from each other? So you may or may not get through all of those questions in the course of sort of 15 minutes. So perhaps tackle a few of them or as many as you can get through, but we'll try and gather some feedback on all of those things from the groups in our wrap up. So as I say, if you could appoint a spokesperson once you're out in your groups, you'll get about a 1-minute warning to come back. So crack on with your conversations until that happens, and you should get an automatic link anytime now just to jump you to your group and enjoy your discussions. Guys, we've got a few people. Just want to check in. I've got I can't see names, but whether RVN 55137.
I don't know who that is.
And PMB City 53. Are you guys all right? I don't know if you can hear us or if you're having any issues joining your groups. No. Okie doke.
I didn't join mine just because I was going to pick up the questions and then go in and have them in.
Just going to pause the recording and then I'll start it again when we're out of the group.
Sorry, Jules and Nikki. I pressed the button. I jumped the gun a bit, so I got,
You did. You left us.
I'm sorry.
Welcome back, everybody. I think most groups are nearly back with us or are making their way back gradually. So, and nice to see a few more faces as well. Appearing on the screen. Excellent. Hope you had some good chats in your groups, some useful discussions. I won't force every group to feedback if they don't want to, but I'll kind of whiz around quickly and perhaps just pick up either a couple of takeaways or perhaps a couple of key answers that you felt or themes that you felt came out in your discussion conversation, just so we can sort of share them around between ourselves. That I think would be helpful. So in terms of, I'm going to start with group 1. If you knew you were group 1, I don't know if you didn't. Let me see if I can see who was in that. There was Emma,
Jules, Nikki and Oliver.
Yeah, sorry, thanks, Jill. Perfect.
That's me then feeding back. I'm Nikki Moore. We had a really useful conversation and 2 points really emerged from that. So the first one was on reflecting the conversations across the afternoon. We felt that disabled people still exist in deficit and that inclusivity is not embedded in everything we do, and it should be. That people impose, or there is a chance that people may impose their assumptions on what people should be like and be able to do, and that we should really reframe our practice in terms of recognising that everybody that we work with is an individual, and we shouldn't class people with a disability outside that group. We should just think about working with everybody as clients. The second thing that we thought about was that services are not really designed to help with that on a number of accounts. So one of the things I noted was the way we are funded to work, the resources that we're given. We're often asked to work around a 30 or 45-minute interview schedule, for example, when in fact, if we're working with somebody with a disability, we should be able to use our own initiative to give them the time that they need in order to support them. But that expectation by service providers is not that. That we need systems that are inclusive by design, and that includes the training of CDPs as well. We all thought that the training should include a mandatory module on working with people with disabilities. It shouldn't be an add-on or a sort of continuous professional development module that you could take at a later date, that it should be embedded within the training. So that they were the key things really that we discussed.
Brilliant, thank you, Nikki. Room 2, which had Naomi, Sarah and Vicky in.
Hello.
Hi, Naomi.
Hi. I'll just speak for all of us because we lost one of our members, but we've said exactly the same thing. First of all, we're extremely complimentary to Vicky for the work that she was doing. It was really outstanding and incredibly impressive. But also that a lot of the work, I did notice that so much of it was appropriate also for non-SEND, and that was quite telling. And it kind of it was similar to the idea that we all have our disabilities, whatever they are, and so this sense of unifying us into the same sort of status, I think, is quite important. It also comes into this embedded inclusivity point. I think it should really be more normalized instead of sort of specialist thing and an exclusive thing. It should be just standard practice across the board in with employers and then we talked about didn't really know in terms of the takeaways. I wasn't so sure on that piece, but I just wanted to share a brief point that I just mentioned. One of the best doctors I ever had really severe cerebral palsy, and she came through in a walker and she found it very difficult to speak. And I remember that I made an immediate judgment in that moment, and that it was immediately quashed the minute she started speaking because she was so fantastic. And so I thought the idea of role modeling would be extremely potent for this group of people, and possibly for all of us, actually. And yeah, so I would really make that, to see it, to see the quality. It's really struck home because I'm developing my own business right now, and I remember that doctor clearly. So when I'm looking at who I'm going to employ, it's that doctor that comes to mind.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that, Naomi. Room 3 had Claire, David in.
I made the mistake of writing notes, so they gave me the job of feeding back. One of the things that we were quite strongly taken with was Vicky's description of the parental role, and recognizing that for parents, moving from advocating powerfully for their child to handing over agency to the individual and enabling them to support their transition was a difficult one to take. So that was one of our takeaways, and we sort of saw parallels really with the role of the careers practitioner in that as well, actually supporting the agency of the young person or the client or whoever we're working with. And the second question that we addressed was, what are the pressures and difficulties that this area of work presents to us as researchers or as practitioners. And we had Claire in the group, so we picked up that topic of the pressures of self-disclosure and identity, and how that can be quite a problematic area at the moment, and actually drilling down into data and what we can do with that data in terms of improving practice if we're not getting the appropriate self-disclosure or ability to make judgments about people's self-identity, that can mean the quality of our data is not so sound or incisive. Claire will send me an email to say you murdered that, but that was a bit of the discussion. And then the last bit was me on my hobby horse. There's a lot about community, isn't there, here in what we've talked about, and the importance of agency in relation to employers is really important. And I think we were wanting to see a more positive examples of employers supporting diverse employment and practical insights into, therefore, what individuals could ask for, so that there were more practical ways in which people could be agents of their own future and say, I would be able to do this if you could help me with adjusted hours. And so we felt that maybe when Charlie Mayfield produces his report, if there could be lots of really strong examples of case studies from employers that have done good work in this area, that will be helpful. I'll shut up now.
Thank you so much, Claire. No, some really great points there, and appreciate those. Keith, Laura and Michael were room 4, I think. Is one of you happy to speak?
We didn't decide.
Okay, well,
a commentator, report back person, but Laura made some really good points, as did Michael. So I'll leave them to share with you.
Okay, happy to go.
That's all right.
Thanks,
It was
Laura.
a good conversation, and we were I'll say very appreciative of the presentations, particularly the integrated approach that Vicky shared with us, and very thorough. I think there were a couple of things that you just mentioned as well, Claire, around disclosure and the pressure that's put on individuals around disclosure. And we're just wondering if I was wondering if there's a way of reframing that. So why is the emphasis on the individual to disclose? I don't know, it feels like there must be a way of kind of redoing that and it being the opposite way around, because there's lots of examples, especially if intersectionality is such an issue that you mentioned, Claire, in your presentation. It's like, how many disclosures does a person need to make? The other thing that struck me was around some of the data. It's very logical and very rational, but that's not the lived experience of living, presumably, with a disability. And that came through in conversations with Jules and with Vicky very strongly about what that's actually like. So I'm wondering, as practitioners and researchers, can we bring that to life a bit more about what's the actual lived experience rather than the numbers alone? The numbers, yes, plus would be great.
Fantastic. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
And last but not least, group 5, which had Karen, Laura in. Karen, are you going?
We didn't actually get as far as nominating someone, so I know Emily's in a car. I don't know if I'll go. Shall I? Since we've got about 1 minute.
Go for it.
Just echoing everything that was said before, and totally agree with Laura what you just said about the lived experience being such a valuable part. It's not just the data, is it? And I think that's what hits home more. For those in higher education, the disabled student commitment is looking at that process, and I sort of head up the transitions to employment part, and we are looking at how can we stop individuals having all the onus being on them, sort of having to then share that information. Don't even like the term disclose. It sounds like sharing something that is embarrassing, like, you know, sort of MPs do when they've had an affair, that kind of thing. It's not right. It's the legal language in the Equality Act, but it's still, so we're looking at what can be done to sort of help with that transition. But just to represent my group, we echoed a lot of what was said before. Really appreciated all the content from today. I think one of the points, and this was Emily's, was about inclusive design and thinking just the more that things are put in place for those that have had to shout for it, ask for it, the more it actually helps all of us. So, and I think that we, as those of us who are practitioners and those who are researchers, have a role in sort of advocating for those who need it most, and need to do that at a range of levels wherever we find ourselves as well. I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Karen. And I think a really, really great point to kind of close down on there in terms of that responsibility. We all have to advocate for those who need it most. So just going to do my job of kind of wrapping things up now. Thank you all for that feedback. I hope you found the discussions useful, and you obviously found the presentations really useful, and they were great stuff. I mean, just to pick out a couple of things. One thing perhaps from every speaker, just as we wrap up, I thought it was really interesting, Will, talking about this idea that we depend on each other to make the ecosystem work. I thought that was a really, really interesting point he made on that, and that nature of the ecosystem more broadly. With Elizabeth, her point about make sure you have the people in the room you're designing for. I thought that was a great point. Vicky, with that the brilliant reframing of the context of contextual careers in the context of her school and everybody there. Claire making that great point about how we need to mind the gap in terms of the achievement gap and the outcome gap, and how we collaborate to change that. And then finally, Jules, with those really important points about the vital importance of perception in all of this. So, I mean, look, I've just picked out one thing from everybody there. There were way more points than that, but really brilliant sessions from everyone. So thank you, everyone who came and speak. Thank you to all of you for sticking around all the way through the session, who've been here for the whole thing. We really appreciate that from a NICEC perspective. Just one bit of advertising before we go. We have the Bill Law Award at 5 o'clock on the 1st of July. It's an online event, so please do join us for that, but also have a look on the NICEC website for any other events and things that you might find useful or interesting to come along and join. So thank you all for joining. Thanks to Jill for making all of the tech work. Much appreciated on that front. Thanks for all your contributions, chat, presenting, all of that. We'll make the slides available afterwards as well, and hope you have a wonderful evening or rest of your day. Thanks a lot.